Welcome back to another episode with Fly Tying with me, Telis Katsugiamos, and this episode is going to be hackle flies, both for coastal fishing like typical streamers and also for salmon and sea trout in the river. We are going to tie a very famous pattern called woolsock or ullsock in Swedish, which is basically a fly just made of hackle, and it has its origin in the south of Sweden. You can do it with, the original one is brown and red. We're gonna do it with black. I personally like that version a little bit better. And the sea trout version is also gonna be tied with a little bit different materials, and I think it's a very easy fly. It's a little bit more steps, it's because we're using a lot of hackle, but it's a quite easy fly to tie, and it's a very good one, especially for my personal opinion. I use this a lot in the late season when I want to have, especially in smaller sizes, this semi-stiff hackle makes a lot of movement when we're retrieving the fly both in the river and in still water, and it seems to attract both salmon and sea trout very well. And I've caught a lot of very nice late season salmon and sea trout in Mörrum, for example, on this fly. So if you're ever planning a trip in August or September to that river, I highly recommend that you have this fly in your box. Alright, let's get started. As you can see, we're gonna start with the single hook for the coastal fly. And for this I'm using a partridge hook or any other good streamer hook that you prefer. I really like this one. This is a very solid hook that you can trust. And I'm going to use a very fluorescent hot orange thread because I want to create a head in the end that is very UV fluorescent. Makes the fly look pretty cool, and sometimes I do believe that little extra color does make a difference. When you're wrapping the thread down, you can see that most hooks has a natural bend where the hook bend starts. It is often in, as you can see, alignment with the tip or the needle of the hook. So if I keep going down here, the fly, especially if you're tying or adding a tail to this to the hook, it will look pretty weird and you will not get a good proportion of the fly. So I normally just wrap the thread all the way down to that point. Here we're gonna add fluorescent yellow Salmon Signature Dub. Pretty bright. I want to make a little striking point. So you can see I just cut it off or pull that dubbing off, and I'm rolling it in my fingers. Makes it a little bit easier to attach. And I never is it's not completely true, but 99% of the time I don't dub regularly like on the thread. I just put it on the hook shank or the tube and just start wrapping it. And there we go. Okay, now it's time for the first hackle, and this fly will have 3 hackles, all ringneck rump pheasant. You can of course use different kind of hackle here, but I really like that because this is very long fibers. And what I'm gonna do here is this, as you can see, it's a very fragile hackle. So what we're gonna do, I'm just gonna clean this and then I'm gonna add ribbing before I attach this. I forgot about the ribbing. So I'm cleaning off. We don't need a lot. The thing with this is that we want that fly, since we're having 3 hackles on this fly, we don't want each hackle to be very bulky. So if you want to have it really slim, you can also peel this off, so you're only hackling with 1. But I want to have both, but I'm not going to use a lot of it. So you can see I'm cleaning this pretty thorough, like so. I'm cutting. So this is prepped, but before I attach that, the only reason why I'm attaching this monofilament 0.16 millimeters up to 0.20, so around 7x to 4x to 3x or something like that. It's a good choice, because this will just make the fly stronger. So I'm attaching that first, because this is the last thing that I'm going to wrap forward. That's why I'm attaching it first. Otherwise I'm going to make my fly tying a little bit more difficult for nothing. So attaching that just on the edge of that dubbing. Taking my scissor, I'm going to duplicate, but you don't really need to do that hackling trick here, because these are pretty soft. You can just, as you can see, you can just fold it, then turn it around, or first wrap here, then one more. Should be around 2, max 3, otherwise it will get too bulky. Okay, there we go. Then I'm just putting that over like so. Funny thing is that as this is, if you would use a short shank hook, you can see this is actually a pretty good fly as it is. So we can keep our fly tying life very simple if we would like to. But we're gonna make, of course, a larger fly than that. But if you would like to use or make those very small but still volume flies, try to do this. Use a short scud hook or something, or carp hook, and then just a little bit dubbing one hackle. This, I can guarantee you, will work very nicely. Blended eye stub, and this color is called olive copper. Matches that hackle pretty nice. I'm taking for each step. Now we're gonna make the first step. Same here. Just putting that dubbing here. As you can see, it spins around, but I'm here with my fingers and putting around. But now you can see it stopped moving there. That means it's locked. Now I can start moving forward a little bit. I'm gonna stop just before the half of that body, because now it's time for the second hackle, which is the same. Clean, pull that off, but you're not gonna use. This pheasant has a very nice shimmer to it, as you can see. It has a natural shimmer, which is, I really like it. You can also do this in a rusty brown kind of variation. That's a very nice or very popular color. This is very similar to the fly that I have that's called Mallard Express. The difference here is that we're having 3 steps, which is the original Woolsock fly, has 3 steps, and there's also a couple of Danish flies tied like this. But everything more or less is variations of the next one. It's hard to invent something new or completely new. We take inspiration and then we create something with a little touch to it, just like this one. I'm attaching it. There we go. Cut that off. Then the second or last part, third part of the body. The same dubbing again, olive copper. Put that there, pinch it. Now you can see it stops, there it stops spinning around. Now we can start moving it forward. Pull that back. It's for our eye. It's nice if these steps has the same distance in between the hackle for proportion's sake, but I don't think the trout really care, but it will look better. I mean, it's always nice to impress your buddies, isn't it? Then here, and then clean that, carefully pull that off. These kind of feathers, as every other feather, has a convex and a concave part. If I would attach this like so, having the hackle stem facing me, I will have the concave facing forward when I'm hackling. I do not want that. I personally at least don't want that. I want the hackle to be facing or leaning backwards like it is already here. So of course, if you are attaching it in the wrong direction, it will be way more difficult, and the fibers of the feather will be pointing a little bit everywhere. Sometimes that might be good, of course. And once again, these details I do believe is for the human eye and the fishing buddy. Attaching that, and then these are that soft, so you can just carefully pull those back. Right, The thing is, for example, now I'm just going to show you, because this might get a little bit too thick, or it ended up pretty nicely. But if you find yourself with still a little bit too much, then you can just peel it off. And now you can see I'm still using the thin part of the feather, and now you can, it very rapidly goes into a thick stem. You do not want to hackle this. As you can see, it just breaks. So try to use those soft parts on any feather, really. That's the thing. All feathers will be very difficult to work with if you're not using the more mobile part of it. So what I'm doing now, I'm pulling these a little bit up for the only reason now, you don't have to use ribbing, of course, but I want to use this nylon here, and I'm crossing it. So I'm wrapping this in the opposite direction. And mainly I want that to hit the hackle stem pretty good. But of course I'm putting it a little bit over the dubbing as well, because that will make that fly stronger. And I mean, a sea trout or any rainbow trout, or any trout in that matter, they're predators and they do have pretty rough teeth. So if you have a fly that's very, not sloppy, but easily tied with skipping, like for example a step like this, then you will have one or maybe two fish and then the fly will break. This will of course make the fly last a little bit longer. So that's that. Glue. Making sure there's nothing here. And then cut. If you want to make that extra shiny or extra bright, that head, you can add a little bit of UV glue, but that Loctite will do it. And you can see that this head is, I mean, it doesn't need UV glue to be this UV bright. See, that dubbing as well is very, very, very strong in fluorescent effect, same as this. I'm not maybe the one that believes extremely much in this, but yeah, there is of course something to it, because in some cases it is of course proven that the fish does see those things that the human eye doesn't. Alright, that's the coastal version of the Woolsock that I normally use in olive or in rusty brown, and we're gonna set up for the more famous one for salmon and sea trout in rivers. Alright, now we're doing the Woolsock salmon version, which is a double hook. We can also, the original is on a treble, but that is way more difficult to tie. I personally like any double hook, of course, will do, but the Patriot is a very good hook. So I'm attaching the black thread now. I've changed just beneath the eye there. And I'm going down. You remember I said earlier about the natural bend? You can see here the bend is a little bit further down. I'm gonna use that a little bit now. Be careful. You can see I snagged the needle there. This is even worse when you're tying on a treble. You will get your fingers hurt. Alright, we're gonna use fluorofiber here. We're gonna do a red little butt here. You can use any dubbing or whatever you want. This I personally like. Fluorofiber gets a nice shimmer to it. And I'm just gonna use a little bit. I'm gonna wrap this as a tag. So I'm cutting here. And pulling off any potential strands that are shorter than the other, makes it more difficult to tie. I'm gonna wrap this all the way up again. The reason is because we're gonna use flat braider later on, or floss, or whatever you want to use. The more even the surface beneath this, the easier it gets to create a very nice tight looking body. So you can see I went forward a little bit again. That's about how much I should wrap. now you can see if I just start wrapping this, it is easy for those fibers like this to separate. So to avoid that, if you just twin this a little bit, that will not happen. But of course this will also create more volume. But in this case, I don't mind, and this will, as you can see, flatten out because I'm wrapping this pretty hard because I want this to be strong. I do not want to half-ass wrap this around, because then those strands, after a fish or two or a rock or two as well, they will start break out, and that does not look good. Same here. Now you can see I'm cutting that to once again create a surface that is as even as possible. You don't need to, but I mean, why not make the fly look as pretty as possible? Okay, that's the first step. Now we're gonna add the rooster saddle or rooster hackle, or any you can use, of course, whatever hackle you want, but the rooster in this case, in my personal opinion, is the best for this, because this fly should have a certain amount of stability in the hackle. You do not want this to be too soft, especially because we're fishing this in the river, where you have currents and everything that squeeze those hackle fibers together. So I'm gonna clean a little bit more than I would do if this would just be the front hackle of a tube fly, for example, with a wing. Now the main hackle I'm gonna use is this. Then of course I don't mind adding like 1 or 2 wraps of hackle with a little bit more volume, but the main hackle here will be the stiffer part. So there, pulling that off like so, attaching that there, tight, close to that. Take your scissor. Now it's time to duplicate this hackle. Compared to the other ones, these are stiffer and more, it's not as easy to work with as the other ones. So take the sharp edge of the scissor on the inside, not the cutting part, but the 90-degree one you have on the inside of the scissor, and then you manipulate the fiber on the side that will hit the hook shank first, which is that part, because I'm wrapping from me, not towards me. 1, 2, and then every time I come down here or come around, I pull back, pinch, and release that, and reverse my grip. A lot of I used to use a hackle plier, rotational ones, and all that kind of stuff, and of course that will make it maybe easier. But for me, it's been, I try to have my fly tying, and well, same in fly fishing, I try to use and bring as little stuff as possible. I think it's to keep it as simple as possible. But of course that means that instead of using things that helps us in this scenario, I will have to do it myself, if you understand what I mean. I need to be a little bit more careful with what I'm doing. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna add a little bit of flash here, just a little bit, to make a little bit more extra shimmer into the fly. And the flash that I'm gonna use is Crystal Flash Hot Orange, or Fluorescent Orange, and it's just, seriously, just 1 strand, and we're not gonna use a lot of it. Putting it like so. 1, flip, 2, 3. Then you just cut them a little bit in different length. That will give a little bit extra movement and shimmer in the water. The body will now be flat braid instead of dubbing on this fly. You can use, of course, black floss or whatever black braidy kind of material that you have. And remember, once again, to tie that to cover the whole body, to keep that the base of the fly or everything underneath as smooth and even as possible. As you can see here, like that. And then I'm going up to about the middle of the rest of the body here. Not really, a little bit shorter. Remember, the difference between tying a tube fly, that we have a certain point where we have to end. On a tube fly, we can just keep moving forward because we can cut the tube. Here, we need to remember that this is the final point that we're tying at, because we do not want to tie up on that eye on the hook. So this flat braid here now, I'm putting 1, 2. Then I'm attaching it on the halfway up on the third wrap. I'm not gonna cut this off. I'm just gonna tie that a little bit forward and then go back again, because this part of thread here now we're gonna cover with hackle and then just keep using this instead of cutting it off. We're saving a little bit materials by doing so. I'm gonna use Black Rooster again. This should be about the same fiber length as this one. So remember, when you're taking a feather measures, you're not using this part. If this is shorter, I mean, of course it will work, but it should keep the same length of the hackle. So cut that. Remember, as usual, if you've been following me, you probably have heard this several times. Convex part of the feather or concave. The convex, the up part, which means this part should be facing you, and this is concave. The matte part should be facing from you. The reason why this is important is that this makes the fly tying way easier. If you want those fibers to be pointing as the red one here, a little bit backwards. Take the scissor again. Clean. The reason why I haven't cleaned the rest is I want to adjust how much I'm using depending on how it looks now when I'm hackling. I want to have a certain amount of volume. Sometimes I tie these very bulky when I'm aiming a little bit more for like spring trout or something like that. But if I'm going for back end salmon or trout in very like difficult conditions, low water and stuff, I want this fly to be a little bit more discreet. So now you can see I cleaned as I was tying. Of course, makes things a little bit more difficult. But if you end up halfway in your fly and you see, oh shit, this is too little, or this is too much, it's always easier to remove than add. It's the same if you're adding too much material to the fly itself or too much hair in a wing. You can always pull out a little bit. But a good key point or a thing to remember is less is more. If you think you have if you always struggle with adding too much, take away a little bit. When you think it's enough, take away a little bit more. That helped me a lot when I was in the beginning, because I always overdressed my flies before. Then I started using that method. When I think it's good, take away a little bit more. Alright, last hackle, same length. Measuring out here. Now I see that I do not want to use this, because this is going to be too long. So then I'm measuring somewhere here. Cutting. Remember, now you see clearly again the convex and the concave. So when I'm attaching this is facing from me, not towards me. There we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or something like that. Take your scissor, and then you pull back the rest like this. Okay. Every time I come down here, I reverse my grip. Once again, I'm not using any tools. So that means that if I keep just hackling without releasing the stem, you see that this starts to twin. Which then makes all the previous work I did preparing the hackle more or less mute. So remember to do that. And then with a clean stem, I'm coming up here. 1, 2, and then wrapping that down. And then I'm taking the scissor and cutting that off. Stop wobbling. And I'm gonna wrap a little head here. Something like that. Taking the glue here. When you're gluing the thread like this, you can see I never do any whip finish or knots or stuff. You should glue about 3 or 4, well, like 3 centimeters or something of like an inch of thread, and then cut. That will be about 6 wraps of thread, and that is enough. This will never, that glue will never break, and I mean, it's like building a furniture. Glue holds the stuff together. So, or a solid screw, but we can't screw anything into this. If you want to make that head shiny, add, in my opinion, a little bit UV glue to that. I can do that now to show you. I'm taking the needle here. You don't need to, but I mean, why not? It makes the fly a little bit prettier. Just a little drop here. And then carefully adding that. Of course, doing this, that's a little bit too much. 1 second. Rather do this in 2 steps than overdoing it. This will create that nice, shiny looking head of the fly. And the UV glue, instead of adding several layers of like traditional fly tying varnish, this is way faster. Different glues will react differently, because sometimes I remember in the beginning using UV glue, I thought it didn't harden enough. Then I was trying different glues. Then I figured out or heard from other fly tying friends that it's the frequency of the pen, the light itself with different glues reacts differently. So if you have glue that doesn't really work or this doesn't really get hard, try to use a different pen before you go buy new glue. Alright, that's the wool sock. And the black and red one that I have here, in my personal favorite. The original one is like with classic fiery brown and red. You can tie this in whatever colors you want. This is an awesome fly for both salmon and sea trout, and a classic in the Baltic rivers here in Sweden. Alright, next time we are going for a little bit more shrimp flies. I hope to see you in the next episode. Leave a comment if you want to know anything else or if you have any questions. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching.